Welcome back to Talking Europe. Well, we're in Paris to continue our look at the future of France as it swears in its new president, Emmanuel Macron. I'm joined in studio by Sylvie Goulard, a member of Macron's campaign team from the very start, and also an MEP, of course, with the Alliance of Liberals and Democrats in Europe. Ms. Sylvie Goulard, welcome to the show.
Good morning.
Morning. We've been told, and it was greeted with such joy across the Brussels institutions and many member states, that the win for Emmanuel Macron was really a win for Europe. But was it that? Or was it simply the fact that he's not from the traditional, or he had stepped away from the traditional political parties in France?
Well, no, you can like or dislike Emmanuel Macron, but he was really clear, crystal clear on his European commitment. He even took the risk, to put it this way, since the beginning, when people considered us crazy, to campaign on a pro-European message on the euro, on migration, on defense, on sharing sovereignty, on trade. So it's amazing that we won.
You think it's a real element that the French appeal to, not just that he was stepping away from what they've known, this traditional left-right that they've had since the start of the Fifth Republic. Europe, is that important here?
Yes, it is. In any case, if you look at the future, if you start with the analysis of the world as it is, I mean, too many people think in the box. They really believe that the only real challenge is left-right, but it's not the case. The question is, how do we face terrorism? How do we tackle climate change? How can we make sure that we have a voice in the future in the world, being always shrinking in terms of population and influence? And we are very lucky because we inherited the tools, the habits of cooperation. We have elements of a supranational democracy. Everything is not perfect. And what Emmanuel said during the campaign was exactly that. We want to keep the framework and make it evolve and develop some policies that are underdeveloped. We don't consider that everything is right, but we remain committed.
Yeah, no, he had reforms that he was calling for to put in place, which we'll look at a little bit later. Of course, now here in France, the big question is on these parliamentary elections. How much, support really will the new president have? Because in France, it's a dual system. The president names the prime minister, but that prime minister has to have, a solid backing in parliament, a strong government. I imagine La République En Marche is quite convinced they'll get that absolute majority in those legislative elections. But what if they don't? If Emmanuel Macron is left with a prime minister from the Republican Party or the Socialist Party, will we have a president that can put these changes in place that he pledged to do?
Well, I don't want to say something that might be considered arrogant, but we have been, how can I say, during the last months, everybody was telling it is impossible to get in the Élysée, it will not work, the old parties are too strong, etc. So we did it. Now we have the same people who were campaigning for him on the ground, who are at the heart of the team that is going to be candidate for the Assemblée Nationale. It will not be an easy game. It was not to get into the Élysée, but I remain very confident and optimistic because one of the branding of Emmanuel is to be positive. So we should stop thinking always that frogs are going to rain about France and try to do our best to get the majority. If not, then what would happen? We would be in the situation of so many countries in the northern part of Europe. We will build coalition and we will try to rule the country the same. So I think we should stop presenting the Fifth Republic and the so-called stability we enjoyed before that put the country where it is with high unemployment, unegalitarian schools, with not enough jobs and trade. We should not consider it perfect and be afraid of the future. There will be some risk in the future, but there were some very big flaws in the system as it was.
And of course, out of the candidates being put forward for those 577 parliamentary seats, a lot of new faces for La République En Marche, the Republic on the Move. We have a bullfighter, former bullfighter, I believe, an award-winning mathematician, some unemployed people, a lot of people who aren't professional politicians, so a lot of fresh ideas. But does that also make things a little bit less efficient, certainly at the start? Is that not harder than the task?
Did you really consider they were all Nobel Prize and all very efficient in the last system? I've never noticed this. So first of all, the quality of the people we present is very high. There is also a huge diversity, equality between men and women, young people with migrant backgrounds. So they are the country. They look like the people. You take the tube, you can see the same type of people. I really believe that some French people, at least, are a little bit fed up with old white male from the 20th century. I have nothing against men, and I hope we will have a balanced representation, because we need also people with experience and with other from other generations. But we need some fresh air. We need people who are familiar with digital. We need really a renewal, and we hope we will bring it.
And just very briefly, the former Socialist Prime Minister Manuel Valls apparently applied, but he didn't make the cut.
No, it did not apply, actually, because, you know, it was on internet. You had to send your CV, and it did not apply. Then I would say an elegant solution was found, that was not to endorse him, but not to put another candidate in front of him. We also have to respect the people who were in charge in France during the terrorist attack. You know, it was not easy to be a prime minister or to be in charge of home affairs when you had so much blood everywhere in the country.
For sure. Of course, 20 million people voting for Emmanuel Macron, double really those that voted for the far-right candidate Marine Le Pen. That was 12. But still, another element of these elections was, you know, abstention rates higher than they've been in 40 years. And 12 million people, I think, didn't cast their ballots. Another 4 spoiled them. So really, does Emmanuel Macron have the support of the people?
He's perfectly aware that he was elected under the circumstances you are describing, and he's perfectly aware that some people are asking for something else. But I think we should not put the blame on Emmanuel Macron, who took the risk to be a candidate. In my opinion, the reason why the French dislike deeply what is happening, it is that because the last years, not only the 5 Hollande years, but the last 20 years in the French politics were very difficult, and people were disappointed. So part of the disappointment and the abstention might be related to the personality of Emmanuel Macron, if they don't like him. But in my opinion, there is something going beyond. People are simply disgusting. They don't want to go to the polls, so we have to convince them again. And that's the reason why it's so important to have these new faces. Maybe they will not be the best ones, but at least it is an attempt to offer something else.
So a call really on one side for change, and on the other side there seems to be somewhat of a fear for change here in France. Already on the first day he was president-elect, we saw you know, a few hundred people turn out to protest, local level trade union branches organising a manif, as it's well known here in France, a protest promising to keep Emmanuel Macron under pressure from day one, fearful really of some of his economic reforms, as Ellen Gainsford reports.
Less than 24 hours after his election, President-elect Emmanuel Macron is already facing his first protests. Local-level CGT union branches organised the event, promising to put pressure on him from day one, reminding him that many voters didn't agree with his economic programme, but gave him their vote to block the National Front.
If we don't organize the counterattack now, we risk being wiped out, as he's probably going to govern by executive order. He supported the use of Article 49.3. He could obstruct our democracy.
Around 2,000 people joined the march from Paris's Place de la République to Place de la Bastille. They're worried about labour reforms Macron plans to introduce before the summer, which he could fast-track through Parliament by executive order.
We have decided, as Macron says so well, to march, en marche, for our futures, not for their future, not for their interests as capitalists.
His main proposal is to allow company-level agreements on issues such as working hours, currently decided by industry-wide negotiations. Macron campaigned on a pro-business platform and backed François Hollande's El Khomri law, legislation aimed at making France's jobs market more flexible. Deeply unpopular, the law provoked widespread protests last summer.
So calling for more flexibility in the workplace, some, certainly French people, fear that that means they will simply be working more for the benefit of multinationals.
Well, you know, the problem in France is not the people who are working more. It's the problem of people who are not working at all. And the ones defending the old system and the status quo make as if we would not have a huge unemployment problem. So what we want to do is to give jobs to the ones unemployed. We have 3 categories of people we have to target. The first one is the young people. We have a very high level of youth unemployment, 25%. We have very low level of employment for the seniors, and seniors is beyond 50. And we have long-time unemployment, which is also to tackle. So the reason why we want to put jobs and growth at the top of the agenda is that very often the trade unions defend the interests of the insiders and not the interest of the outsiders.
So that flexibility really to encourage employers to hire more people because they'll feel less fearful that they have, you know, somebody employed for life even when their business goes down. Is that the idea?
It's the idea. The idea, of course, is to keep some guarantees. I mean, we are not going back to the 19th century, the pre-industrial Zola period. What we want is to give small companies above all, because many jobs are created in very small companies, the chance to hire people easily. And you can only hire people easily if you know that the day you don't have contracts anymore, you can give them a chance elsewhere. And also for the people, we should be more positive. Many people are bored at work. So the fact that you can change, that you can easily find another job is also not only for the ones who are completely unemployed, but also for the people who are in a certain routine, they have a fatigue at work, and this is what we need to put in the society, some boost toward future and change.
And just very briefly, one of the women interviewed in that report said her fear was that Macron could push through reforms through executive order rather than going through the parliament. Do you think he would?
No, because first of all, the woman is mixing two things. Emmanuel Macron was adamantly against the use of this tool that is giving the government specific powers against the parliament. He left the government more or less for this reason, because it was employed, it was used against his willingness. The second thing is that we have to make clear that it's a fast track. A fast track because people unemployed are at home waiting for solutions. So we will try to have a dialogue. We will discuss with all the people in charge in the trade unions who want to be constructive. But the ones who want just to obstruct, then we have to deliver for the ones, once again, who are at home without a job.
Okay. Of course, on the economy, two goals really. There is that stubborn nationwide unemployment of around 10% that, you know, will be obviously one of the top of the to-do list to reduce here in France. But at the same time, there's also the question of French deficit. It's still breaking those EU rules. And with Macron also a very pro-EU president who wants to fall in line and overhaul the European Union, which will be the priority?
No, but it's the other way around. I mean, the best proof that it is not enough to spend money is that we don't have the results. I mean, if the system of... We have reached in France the high of 56% of public spending to GDP, which is amazing. It's the first country in the European Union. The average is 48, and some countries are below. So it is clear that we spend a lot, and we don't tackle unemployment, and we also have trade deficits. So we have to use the money in a better way, which can help to create job and boost the real economy.
Yeah, so spend differently. That will go down well with perhaps getting that Franco-German partnership we were talking about in the first half of the show up and running. But there are some European member states that maybe aren't quite as overjoyed to see Emmanuel Macron become a president. He was quite critical against them as he was campaigning for election. It was Poland and Hungary, you know, saying that there should be EU sanctions against some of the changes they've made since these nationalist governments came to power. Indeed, Brussels has been concerned with changes in Poland, to the Constitutional Court, to media freedom. Same in Hungary. How do you think he's going to smooth the waters or work on that level?
Now, once again, I think the reason why we want to respect the rules on budgetary deficit and debt is that it is a rule-based system. Europe is based on the rule of law, because if you don't base relationship on rules, then the only thing is that people fight against each other. It was the 20th century, first half of the 20th century. And rules should be applied not only on economy and budget, but also, and I would say
migration.
even more, on human rights and fundamental principles. We are not making a battle against Poland or Hungary, not against the peoples of these two countries. We are making a battle for freedom of press, for the rule of law in these countries, and these countries are part of the European Union.
And do you think the European Union will move to make sanctions or consequences at least for these member states? Because so far we haven't really seen anything happen.
The tools in the treaties are not well conceived. It requires very large majority to get the decision taken to sanction a country. And in any case, sanctions are not the only way. We want to work with the population in these countries. We want to make sure that when you are part of the European Union, you have rights, you become money, you receive money, but you have duties. Under these duties, you have the rule of law, you have the respect of fundamental rights and of some values. And we have to discuss again with all countries. But this is also the reason why France has to do its part on the chapters where it does not respect the rules.
Fair enough. Very finally, what happens if Emmanuel Macron, a Europhile president, you know, as you were saying, it's quite unique for somebody to have run even as a candidate on that pro-EU level. What happens if he fails to overhaul the EU?
Why do you? I think, to be honest, we have a real, we have a sickness in Europe, is to see anything in black. In America, people face huge difficulties and they say, be positive. We want to be positive. You never succeed 100% in life, but I see no reason for a young, bright president who has defeated Marine Le Pen to be seen as a loser and to consider that all countries in Europe will not follow us. I hope that many countries, the English-speaking ones like the UK, they are leaving, but Scotland does not want to leave. Ireland is still part of the European Union, and all the people who are listening to us, that they will help. Show up. And please help and make sure that we can have not a victory for the French vision, but a victory for all of us.
Okay, Ms. Sylvie Goulard, thanks so much for joining us here on France 24. Thanks for your time. Thanks also, of course, to you at home for having watched. Don't forget the parliamentary elections here in France are on the 11th and 18th of June. We will, of course, be following them here on France 24. But for today, that's it from me and Talking Europe. Do take care.